okay, we're gonna put you in the middle of like the boonies. There's gonna be no civilization around you. This is gonna be like goats. Don't do that. Just don't do that to yourself.
Hey guys, welcome back to the KoreKara Podcast. This week we have Dorian, who is an assistant language teacher in Japan. And this interview was really good and really long, so we decided to cut it up in two parts. And in the first part, we're going to talk about Dorian's journey to Japan and how he got into Japan and his journey in learning Japanese. And in the second part, we're going to talk about his sort of struggles and things he had to overcome being a language teacher in Japan. So things such as like discrimination, hurdles from being a gaijin, and more. So make sure you guys tune in next week to hear part 2 with Dorian when he gets really in depth about his experience being an ALT in Japan. Also, really big news, we're finally on Apple Podcasts. So please give us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to us there as well. Thank you guys for listening to KoreKara Podcast.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to KoreKara Podcast. We're back at it with episode 7. It's already been all this time. We're already out here. Today, we have a very special treat. We got a special guest, and that special guest is Dorian, Japanese ALT, and we're so excited to have you. Eric, what do you got to say, man?
Yeah, so this is our first episode with a guest, and Dorian is a old friend of Raza's from back when he was studying abroad in Japan. And Dorian's back in Japan now, and he's working as ALT, and we're excited to ask some questions about that. So Dorian, can you tell us how you got into Japan and like why you decided to go to Japan in the first place?
I want to say it was around 2016. I came out to Japan to study abroad, and I really enjoyed the experience. Learning Japanese and for the most part, I enjoyed meeting new people. Learning the language and trying different things. Like I would never try raw food a day in my life. But just it opened my eyes to so much more out there. So when I came back to America, I just felt empty, just like it's just something was missing. And, Raza was a big friend, back when I was out there. So I decided that, I want to have those kind of experiences again. And I decided to come out here last March, so March of 2019. And I became a ALT, which is assistant language teacher. So basically, I teach English to students of elementary schools, junior high schools, and it's a really good experience. I honestly I can't really put it into words how much I love being a foreigner and being out of my element because I'm learning something new every day. So yeah, that's how I ended up getting out here. I started putting in the applications around, I want to say August, September of my senior year at college. And I already had like 3 or 4 job offers before I graduated. So, get my advice is to get that stuff done early if you're trying to go to another country, especially Japan. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it later, but the experience is definitely an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
So did you always know that you were going to come back to Japan after your study abroad experience?
After I studied abroad, I know it sounds crazy, but I've always felt like my heart was still in Japan, even when I came back, and it just did not feel right. Even the diet, man, is completely different here. So, I would eat like sushi and, rice all the time. And then when I get back to America, it's like, all right, it's time for them burgers. You know what I'm saying? Just burgers, the mac and cheese. I can't even eat that anymore because, when I came back to America, I found out I was lactose intolerant. And I was like, yo, it just ruined everything.
It's like, Kevin, did you like that?
For real, like, cause we got Moss Burger in Japan, we got all these. I mean, you got McDonald's, of course. You got all these different places. And then when I went back that first week I was in America, I ate like a little small Burger King, like mini Whopper or something. And when I tell you I couldn't eat for the whole day, just off of that one burger, I was like, wow, like Japan really changes you like inside and out.
The appetite just like went inside out. Like
It really did. It really did. Like that Disney movie, it had me all kinds of the
hey,
little
shout out
red,
Inside Out, bro.
yeah, the little red emojis, just like got the fire, the flames coming out. Yeah, that's what happened when I ate that burger.
Oh man.
So I was like, yeah, nah, I got to go back. But my heart was just really there. Like I just loved exploring and seeing different places. Like even when I was like lost, I still like was just like, wow, like everything's so beautiful here, everything's so nice and clean and things like that. So I really enjoyed everything. And yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like I always wanted to be out here and I always wanted to experience something new. So even if it was not Japan, because I thought about Korea, Thailand, other places to teach, but Japan is the place that I was most comfortable with because I speak Japanese.
So I guess going back to the whole getting into the actual ALT job. So I'm pretty sure a lot of our audience may be wondering like how exactly you get into it, what exactly application process is like. So can you shed a little bit of light onto that process?
Okay, so basically what you would do is you can use a variety of different websites. For example, there's Glassdoor. There's also a very popular one called Gaijin Pot, which Gaijin in Japanese just means foreigner. So you can look on those type of websites and find a list of jobs. And it doesn't necessarily have to be teaching. It could be IT work. It could be international office or recruiting. There's all kinds of different jobs, technical jobs that you can do. But if you want to be a teacher, just click in that education section and you'll find a list of jobs and their criteria. Maybe you need a bachelor's degree. Some even say that you only need an associate's degree. You just have to know exactly what you want and what you're looking for. And some jobs, unfortunately, will tell you you have to be already a resident in Japan before applying. So those, for people who are living outside of Japan, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to get those. But the company that I'm in right now is a type of company where they usually cater to people that are coming from another country to Japan, and you would be basically having an interview with people, and the interview would consist of a lot of different just topics. Basically, what would you do in these type of situations? What is the best possible outcome if this scenario happens, and what kind of teacher are you? Why do you want to do teaching? Why do you want to be in a different country? And if you just have all those questions prepared, you'll probably get the job.
So these interviews were done over the internet, like while you were still in America?
Yes. So I did most of these interviews through Skype. And then some of these companies actually ask you to do interviews. So you might have, well, not just interviews, but like a specific type of like demo lesson interview. And you'll have to like maybe prepare like 3-minute, 5-minute, I guess, lesson. So maybe it will consist of like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, or like a simple song. And then you would get into maybe teaching like 3 to 5 words in English and use gestures, use props, different things like that. It depends on the job. I didn't have to do that for mine, but there were some interviews where I had to have something prepared.
Also, was there a particular reason why you decided to become an ALT? Was it related to something you studied in college?
Honestly, I mean, other than Japanese, I don't think there was anything else that really got me, I guess, in the mindset of being like, oh yeah, I want to be a teacher, you know. Like I've always loved communicating with people. I've always loved talking and really sharing my story. So I thought of it as an opportunity to spread my culture, more so as a teaching English type of thing. Which I mean, I do. I teach English, but at the same time, I teach my culture as well. So, for example, this past Thursday, I just had a whole lesson where I just told the teachers, screw the textbook. We're just going to go straight into what we call Aizuchi, which is basically words that we use as interjections. So instead of just, hey, my name is, I like green, I can play baseball, and you don't say anything, it's a boring conversation. So if it's like, okay, you know, my name is Dorian, I like Switch. And you'd be like, oh, wow, really? You know, like those type of words. Like, oh, I see. Oh, me too. You know, so I'm getting people more engaged with that. And that's just a part of culture that Japanese people can relate to too. Because in Japanese, you don't just say those things and you're just like sitting there like a brick wall. Like, okay, cool. All right, bye. Like, you're gonna respond like, "Oh, really? You like that? Okay, me too." Or I know this too. Like, at the end of the day, you know, that's really what I loved.
Anyway, I guess getting back to ALT and all the people interested in maybe actually going as an English teacher to Japan. So, like you're saying, there's some jobs that you have to be a Japanese citizen to take, but for jobs like ALT, will they sponsor your visa coming into Japan, and for how long?
As far as visa, like, it's really tricky. Like, because a lot of people, like, they have this broad image of like, oh, I'm gonna be in a new country, I want to stay forever, you know, like I want to just, you know, have anime. Like, it don't work like that. So, you know, if you're gonna go for a job in Japan or a job in any country, you have to check the visa first and what type of visa you're getting. For me, I have a, what do we call it? Instructor visa. So I am like specifically in this country to teach. So there is no other type of job that I can do with this visa. If I want to do a different job, then you can get other visas, such as like a humanitarian visa, or there's a technical visa, where it's more about technology and doing technical work. So yeah, there's different visas, but you just have to know what kind of visa you're getting with that company. So that's a good question to ask during an interview. Like, what visa are you willing to sponsor for me?
Was that a difficult process, like getting the visa?
Surprisingly, it wasn't. I actually got my visa like within the next week, like right after I got the what we call the what is it, certificate of eligibility. Yeah, that COE. Like once you get that joint, bro, just go to your local embassy, and it takes about a week after that, and then you're good to go. Usually they'll give you a receipt once you submit it, be like, okay, it should be ready to pick up by this day.
I see.
Yeah, it's really easy. You just gotta make sure that nothing, you know, crazy happens. I've had a interesting story. I might as well share it now. So, long story short, I was working for, I was doing interviews with two different companies, and I had a COE already like ready for the company that I was gonna join. There was another company that I forgot to actually send the email saying that I declined their company, or I refused the job offer. They went ahead and sent the COE to the Japanese embassy before I even had a chance to send it to the Washington, D.C. embassy, where, you know, is the most current one. I mean, the closest one to me at the time. And so there was a big problem. Like, the company I wanted was just like, yo, what are you doing? Like, there's another company that sent, you know, paperwork, and it's like, you have to choose. And when I told them the situation, like, yo, oh no, I don't want this company. I want, you know, you guys. And then they told me, okay, well, there's a policy, within our company where if something happens like this, you still got to wait like another 3 months
Oh
um,
wow.
until, we can reissue that COE. So long story short, I had to decline both companies because I already bought my ticket to Japan.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's like the
Yeah,
companies got two-timed, got cheated on.
basically. Yes, basically. I'm a two-timer.
And then in the end,
Before
nobody
I
wants you.
Hey, life lesson, guys. Don't be cheaters.
I'm sorry. Uh, my mom's like, so what you been doing?
Yeah. So then at that point, you went to Japan without actually having your teaching job then with any company.
So I did. It was very last minute.
Uh huh.
Yeah, I got the interview for the company I'm currently in, and then right then and there they were like, all right, we got the information, we got the job offer, we got everything good, ready to go. And as soon as I got that information, I got the emails, I immediately printed it out, went to DC, and got the visa within that next week. So it was very last minute, but it worked out.
I see.
And what about housing? Did you have any problems with that? Because I've heard about stories where for gaijin or foreigners, it's difficult to find places to rent. Like some places will specifically not rent to foreigners.
Yes, yes, and yes. So when I first got hired, we did a training, and in the training, um, there was I guess there was a problem going on because they usually use these type of apartments called Leo Palace. It's very infamous in Japan. If you talk to anybody who's lived in Japan, they're gonna be like, "Oh God, you were in those," and they're really small, like small ass apartments. I had a studio apartment, and it was really like not cool, but more was like the long story short, like I actually did end up getting the house. I mean the apartment that I needed. It was a studio apartment. Some people had to wait a long time because there was like flooding going on and like some interior problems. So yeah, they had to remodel basically everything. And yeah, housing, it depends on what you're looking for. Because if you're just one person, like a 1K or 1DK is pretty easy to find. Um, for me, in my current, I guess, condition, I'm in a 3DK and it's just me. So I'm kind of balling right now. Like, I got my little Japanese tatami mat room. I got my playroom. So I'm like, I got my weights in there. Got my my equipment in there. If I want to make videos or whatnot. So it's like it's nice, but you have to be careful about some of the pricing and research the neighborhood. Because there's some neighborhoods, you got Yakuza out here, so the real cheap stuff might have, Yakuza owned apartments and you don't know about it, or they don't thoroughly check and there's like mold.
So have you actually ever run into any Yakuza?
Yeah, actually, the other day.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
There was like this dude like on the train. I was going back home because I had to go to the dentist, and this dude like crouched down, like literally right next to me, and he's not even sitting. He's not even standing up on the train. He was crouched down, like how they do like the little Asian squats.
Some like
He was doing
steak up in the fish, bro.
Oh, he was just doing like Asian squat, like right next to me. He was just like on the phone, and he's like real loud. And one thing, if you know about Japanese culture, you do not, and I repeat, you do not stay on the phone while you're on a train or on a bus. You don't do that. So if people do that, then it's really considered rude. And he was wearing all black. He was tatted up. So I was like, oh yeah, he's definitely Yakuza. 100%. Had the blonde hair. I'm like, yeah, 100%.
Oh, And just for you guys that don't know, having tattoos is a little taboo in Japan, and usually you can't really be seen around it because it's really always associated to Yakuza.
Yeah, a lot of onsen places will actually ban you from entering if you have tattoos that are visible.
Yeah, you have to actually cover them up to actually be able to use the onsen.
Yep.
But I forgot to ask Dorian, like, where are you located in Japan? Are you in Tokyo?
So I'm currently in this place called Koshigaya. So it's in Saitama, which is like right above Tokyo. So Tokyo, for people who don't know, it's not just a city. Okay, it's a prefecture. It's a whole state. And right above Tokyo is another prefecture called Saitama. And so the closest areas to Tokyo for me are this two places. One called Asakusa, and then another place called Tokyo Skytree. I think a lot of people have seen that on Google, like the big Skytree Tower. So yeah.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't watched our previous episode already, we actually talked about the Tokyo Skytree, so go check that out in the previous episode.
Get on it, man.
Get on it. All right, so now we got our boy Dorian out here. You've moved into Japan, and except the thing is, this time it's not study abroad Dorian, it's working Dorian. So would you say you had any, I guess, differences this time around? Anything that was tough right off the bat, or any maybe like a honeymoon phase where you found something really good?
Yeah, I think like the honeymoon phase was when I first got to Japan. I enjoyed, just being back in the fresh air and just being, in a place where I felt like I was at home. And, I had the training going on with my company, and, we were just having fun, with it and learning new things about teaching. And so that was really nice. Being in my new apartment, like it was the first time I've ever had a place where it was just me by myself, like I really enjoyed, having my own space. I've always had an apartment with other people, so for me, it was just really nice to have a place of my own. And, just walking around, seeing the different streets, seeing the different views. Oh, if I go, walk 5 minutes here, there's, Uniqlo. Or there's GU. Oh, I walk like 10 minutes here. Oh, there's a, Mossburger, McDonald's or something. Or like, there's ramen place over here, like 2 minutes. There's Yauko. There's a supermarket, like literally 2 minutes from my park. Like everything was just so nice to just get the layout of. And there's different shrines, temples. So that was the honeymoon phase. It was just, everything was just big, bright, fun. Like, I like, there's so much. I can just use a card to get like a bottle, to drink, or I could just, it was great, but it fades, and it fades quick. That's the reality, and that's anywhere in life. It's once it becomes about work and it becomes more professional, you're not a student anymore. You're not a kid. You got to worry about bills. When those first couple bills came in, like my salary and how much my bills costed for the first, I want to say, a couple months, the reality sets in very quick, very, very quick.
I see. So what would you say were maybe like, what was like the toughest thing you had to go and face right off the bat then? Was it the bills, or did you maybe run into anything maybe related to the ALT, maybe something from training, or just like actually getting into the job?
I think more like as far as the working, like teaching in Japan, I think more than actually the bills themselves, like for my place, it was more of my habits that I had to change and adjust. So for example, if I got a paycheck and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to just go ahead and get all my bills out the way first. And then I just go, hey, let's talk about that Switch though, and I just, I go in, I'm just like, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy that, and buy this, and buy that. And then you realize, what are you going to eat? and then you end up eating ramen for an entire 3 weeks.
Uh-huh.
Or you really have to think about what are you willing to accommodate for yourself. Are you willing to sacrifice your like needs as far as clothing, food, toiletries like in your house, or those things, just for the expense of buying games or maybe things that you won't necessarily need or use. Like that was a habit of mine that I had to adjust to and really grow up. It's part of growing up. And um, as far as the teaching aspect, teaching is not what I thought it would be. Like you have to basically be an assistant. That's what our contract states. That's what ALT stands for, is assistant. So you're not making the lessons. The teacher makes the lessons.
Uh-huh.
So you do the best you can to support that teacher with your English and pronunciation. But at the end of the day, you're not the main teacher. And it was really difficult for me because I like to talk a lot, as you guys are witnessing right now.
So for ALT, do you go out to a local high school or middle school to help the teachers?
Yeah. So usually ALTs will work in a elementary school or a middle school, but high school, I haven't really heard of those cases a lot. More so than going up. Usually ALTs will go down. So maybe kindergarten, preschool, I've heard of those before.
Uh-huh.
But mostly it would be elementary to middle school.
What do you think of the work-life balance of being ALT? Like, how many hours a day do you work?
So it's actually pretty good for people who are used to the 9 to 5 jobs. Like I work 8:30 to 4:15, and that's like pretty simple, pretty manageable. Like I'm really happy with that. There's some jobs, like if you do a Kaiwa, which is basically like private schooling, that is like, whew,
Yeah,
like,
I've heard that's pretty brutal, like 12 hours days sometimes.
yes. I mean, you probably won't leave till like 9 at night, 10 at night, and you gotta be ready for that, and overtime too.
I see. So I guess like another problem I've heard a lot of for ALTs is the location and where you get placed. So you want to walk us through that entire process?
So I was really worried about that, and during my interview, I told them like I studied in Kawagoe, and I'm like used to that area. So me and you, brother, we already know like everything up and down the Claire Mall. The host families out there, like my homies. Our school was nearby, so we could just like go to school, be like, yo, what's up? Let's go get some food. So I was already familiar with that area. So my training was actually in a place called Fukushima, like Fukushima area, and it's like more a little bit northern area, like right above Saitama, and it was very cold. Uh, I was not too familiar with that place, but I knew I didn't want to be stationed there. I didn't want to work there, and so I kept begging and begging and begging, and I encourage anybody, if you do a job like this, like really hassle them. Be like, yo, I want to be in this place. If you say I'm down for anything, I will do anything for the company. I'm like, they will take that into consideration and be like, okay, we're going to put you in the middle of like the boonies. There's going to be no civilization around you. This is going to be like goats. Yeah. And don't do that. Just don't do that to yourself. Know what you want and know your value. Because anytime I go into an interview, it's not just about how I can be an asset to them. It's how can they be a benefit to my life? And you have to really ask those questions to be like, what is it about this company that attracts people? Ask those questions. So to pivot back to what you mentioned, like I really pushed for Kawagoe because Kawagoe is very familiar to me. And during the training, like one of the last couple days, they will finally tell people exactly where they're going to be placed. And some people were getting things left and right, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm going to be like, Tochigi, which is like way up there. I'm being Gunma." And I'm like, "Ooh, all right, I've never heard of that before." Like, good for you. And they had a problem with the whole Leo Palace situation, like I said earlier. So they were like, we have to put everybody in capsule hotels. And if you don't know capsule hotel, it's really small hotels. Like, I'm like,
was that a temporary
I'm like,
thing?
it's a temporary thing. It's like maybe like a week that they had to do that. And look, I'm like 6'1", so so I was like, there's no way my legs gonna fit in that mug. Like, so when they told me, it was like, yeah, so Dory, you're gonna be in Kawagoe, so we're gonna set up a capsule hotel. I was like, wait, say it again, because you're too fast. Like, I just need to hear that again. And they were like, yeah, you're gonna be in Kawagoe, and I'm like, well, I got my host family, so yeah, keep your money. I'm gonna stay with them. So I stayed with them for a week, and it was fairly easy for me to get my location. I got exactly what I wanted. That's nothing but a God thing. Like, that's a blessing. Yeah, I got Kawagoe for the first year. But placement it's up in the wind, man. You don't know what you're gonna get. It's really nerve-wracking. And like, if you know Japan already, then it's scary, because it's just like, oh, I don't want to be like in the middle of nowhere. I got to drive to work. I got to, it's gonna be snowing every day. Like, you don't know.
Yeah, I've heard of ALTs, like they're the only foreigner in the entire city, and it's really hard to make friends.
Yes. That was me. But I already had friends in Kawagoe, so it was like not as bad for me. And I speak Japanese, so I had a lot of Japanese friends that I made. So that wasn't a big problem for me. But my biggest advice: know the layout of Japan before you apply to anything, because if you have an interview, you should be able to ask them, what are the top places that are in need right now. I want to be in a place like this. If you want to be in Tokyo, that's cool. Tell them. If you want to be in like somewhere like Yokohama, or somewhere more like suburban, Kawagoe is pretty suburban. You gotta let them know, because if you don't, and you be like, oh, I'm willing to do anything, I just love anime. Okay, well, they're gonna give you some anime books, and then they're gonna send your ass to the boonies. You're not gonna have any friends. You're gonna be like little goats and squirrels. Like, nah, you're done. You're done.
It's gonna become like a nature anime, bro.
For real, man. Yo, I'm gonna make this new anime called Nature with the Furries. I'm like, what, bro? Bro, you ain't got no friends, man. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that.
But for the placement, is it like the first year you're in Kawagoe, can you just keep that placement for the next year as well, or do they switch it up every year?
Good question. It really depends on the performance, and it really depends on the all inner workings of the school and Board of Education itself. So one thing I will say, and this is a little gripe of mine, with this type of job, you're an assistant teacher, but you're working under the guise that you are a hire from the company that you're working for, the English company. At the same time, you're working for a school or individual schools. Last year I worked for 2. This year I work for 1. So you're working for the English company, but you're also working for the school or schools, multiple schools. But you're also working for the Board of Education. So you have to follow the school's regulations. You have to follow your company's regulations, and you have to follow the Board of Education. And they're all interweaving and doing things on their own and trying to communicate. And sometimes English and Japanese gets miscommunicated, mistranslated into different things. And it's sometimes very complicated and difficult to handle.
So would you say in like those type of situations, like having like a already having a basis in Japanese or knowing like a decent amount of Japanese helps you coming in to becoming an ALT?
Absolutely. For most ALTs coming into the workforce in Japan, uh, the company prefers, they don't require you to know Japanese, but they prefer, if you know a little bit, it'll take you a long way. I mean, Roz, like you and I already know, like we studied, as much as we could back in Japan 4 years ago. So for me, I was already, at a certain level, and I'm like, okay, well, I can have like a little conversation here and there in my Japanese, and it takes you like all the way to the touchdown goal because there's so many times where you'll get lesson plans and they're all in Japanese. And you're just like, what in the world? And you're like struggling, trying to get your Google Translate going. And then at the same time, you're like, okay, what do I do? But for me, I can speak Japanese. So I was like, okay, why don't I just talk to these teachers and ask them what to do? And if you can do that, it really solves all of your problems. For a lot of AOTs, they can't speak Japanese. So by the time it gets to the day of the lesson and you do your lesson, everything's out of whack because the Japanese teacher has like a very detailed lesson plan and you only have like a fraction of what you have to do. And you're just like sitting there like a deer in headlights and they're looking at you like, hey, can you say this in English? Like, did you read, the lesson material? And it's like, if you don't know, if you can't read or you can't speak, I can't read that well. I can read a little bit. But if you can talk to the teachers, it changes everything. And you're bound to get that same school for the next year and build that rapport within the teachers and the principals, vice principal and head principal and head teacher. Like you will get that connection if you know some Japanese. So it really helps me a lot.
What was like the process of learning Japanese? Like, was it really difficult in the beginning? How long did it take for you to be able to speak Japanese?
Well, for me, I started freshman year of college, so I didn't know how to speak at all. I just knew like hiragana, katakana, which is like two of the most basic, forms of the alphabet, and I basically got that down within like 2 weeks of college. And like in my school, they said by the midterm, if you don't know how to write that, then you're done. Like you're gonna fail. So I really grinded on that, but I couldn't speak. It really wasn't until I studied abroad where I started getting out of this mindset of I'm scared, I don't know what to do, I can't do this, class is too difficult. You got to get all that negativity and all of that pressure out of your head and just say, yo, whatever happens, happens. Study abroad is a great experience, and you just got to go for it. Just even if you make a mistake, just go for it. And once you have that mindset, and once you find a way to tap into like what, not just what do I want to say, but how would a Japanese person say it? You start asking yourself those questions and really getting on the grind of your personal study and really not explaining, but speaking it out loud. You really got to just do it. Like for me, when I studied abroad, I was in my host family's house every night, and I would literally stay up until like 2 or 3 in the morning, just practicing how to say different phrases, different words. And like, I mean, this is kind of embarrassing, but I would watch Netflix like every night, just listening to Japanese people. So the first time I would watch something, it would be like in subtitles in English, and I'm like, oh snap, I didn't know I could say it. Like what? Okay, rewind that, and then I just keep listening, and then I say it and just keep saying it. And then when you dream, you're saying it in your brain. So by the time you wake up, it's in there. Even if you don't know it, you're gonna like in conversation, you just like remember it like on a split second. You're like, wow, how did I remember that? Because you're constantly like feeding yourself the information that you want to know. in school, they don't teach you necessarily everything you want to say. Um, and it's not just about speaking Japanese. It's about wanting to convey your feelings, like that's in your head at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had such a big passion for it and such a, I guess, need and yearn for saying exactly how I feel that I started getting different materials. I would get, different books. Books. It's not for everybody. I'm not a book person, so I would get a book and it just would go out of my brain in 2 seconds. So I started watching things. Netflix really is what really got my, I guess, accent the way that it is now. So first time watch it with subtitles, and then second time challenge yourself and just don't watch with anything. And that's how I built up my Japanese level and listen to people when they talk. If you don't know something, just be like, "Hey, y'all, can you say that again?" Like, well, what was that? Or and I would just talk to random people, and if they talk super fast, you just be like, "All right, cool. I don't know what you just said. You say it again, bro." Just fake it till you make it, until you make it, because you will. If you keep trying at it, and just don't be afraid to talk to different people.
Yeah, actually, me and Raza talked about it in our first episode when we talked about how it's not the classroom that will make you good, but it's just having a lot of input and immersion so that you know which phrases work well, and you have the mindset of speaking something when you know is correct versus trying to do a formula that you learn in class.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. You got to have your own formula, and you got to really put in your voice, and you have to really you have to engage. If you don't give the teacher what the teacher wants, that engagement, then you're not going to get anything from that class. And now I'm seeing it vice versa now that I'm a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
If the students aren't guessing or asking questions, then they're not going to get anything out of the class. And that's why I always say mistakes are okay. And I got in big words, and I if they really don't get it, then I'll say it in Japanese. But I'm like, it's okay to make mistakes, because that's what helps you grow into the person that you want to be.
Also, I'm curious, after your study abroad, there was a period of 3 years when you were in America, right? So during that time, were you able to maintain your Japanese, or were you still able to find Japanese friends and talk to them?
Yes and no. I would sometimes get on the phone with some of my friends, but the time zones were really, different, not a whack, so it was hard to do that. I did study Japanese when I went back. My Japanese teacher, I was just messaging her yesterday about my situation and how life is here. And I kind of talked her into the current formula of her classes now, which is basically every Thursday she makes the students only speak Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped me, because it helped me keep my Japanese to the level that it is. And I just didn't have anyone to talk to in Japanese at that time. So, but a really funny story. I was actually working for Wegmans, which is a supermarket that's out on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be some Japanese people that would come in every now and then. And I was like, hey, oh snap. And I worked in the fish area. So it was really there was a lot of Japanese people looking for a specific type of fish, or they were looking for squid or something like that. And they would, ask questions. And then my manager, my coworkers were just like, hey, Dorian, I'm pretty sure that the person's Japanese. I was like, what? Or no, they'll ask me, they'll be like, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, what you think? And then it's weird, because being in another country, you can tell. So I was like, by the accent, I was like, yeah, that's Chinese. That's Chinese. But when someone came and I could tell they were Japanese, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I have that feeling too. It's when you're studying Japanese, you always try to listen harder if you hear some Japanese. Oh, what are they saying? You try to understand.
Yes, I was like, yo, I and especially if they have kids, because the kids they have no filter. They're gonna say Japanese. They're not even gonna try. So I was like, yo. So I started making friends at the workplace because they would ask me questions like, "Where's this specific meat?" or like, "Where can I get this type of cheese or something?" And I was like, "Well, this isn't the." I'm like, "I work in the fish section, but if you want to, get meats or cheese, like I can show you that area." And I was saying in Japanese, they're like, "Oh, you speak Japanese?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I speak a little something, something." So, they invited me to some barbecues in like the local areas, and it wasn't far from where I lived. It was like 15 minutes away from where I lived, where these Japanese people lived, and made connections there. One of the guys I met who has a family, he was working. It was like a part-time job, or like I don't know if he was getting a master's or something, but he was in Johns Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
And so now he's currently in Nagoya. And so, I've been talking to him, lately, and, just making those connections while I was still in America before I, could get a chance to come back out here. So it was hard. It was definitely hard to keep my language. Definitely.
So then you would like recommend, if people, I guess, are thinking about coming to Japan in that meantime before they go there, to try and make as many connections with Japanese people as they can, like online or close by, like physically. Although I guess it's a little hard to do that now.
Yeah, I know, because it's all this this Rona. But absolutely, bro. I 100% agree. Try to go online, get a tutor, or just make friends. In who speak Japanese. Also, if you run into people, if there's a local like Japanese like town or like Korea, like whatever, you can easily, just make those connections. And if you keep that, you keep those connections, you'll be able to continue that the strengthening of your ability. And if you don't really take the time to do that, it's gonna go down, especially in a country where you don't really speak that language. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
but even if there's no Japanese people around you, like people can still immerse themselves with Japanese, like Japanese Netflix or Japanese YouTube, and like that's probably like the next best thing to like having a lot of Japanese friends.
yes, that's the next best thing right there.
But as of now, do you still want to improve your Japanese? Are there goals you're still trying to reach with Japanese, or are you kind of satisfied with your current level?
I'm kind of at a crossroads. It's a good question. I'm kind of at a crossroads because the only really goal I had for learning Japanese was to explain my myself and really convey my feelings. So now I've really gotten to that point where I can do that, but at the same time, I need more vocabulary and I need more, I guess, grammar to really help out with what I want to say. So, really, that's a good question because I really don't know at this point, and I'm like kind of struggling between like what's the next thing to do here? What can challenge me? What can improve my ability? Yeah. That's where I'm currently at right now. Is deciding that,
Hey, thanks for listening to the KoreKara Podcast. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dorian. Make sure to tune in next week though, because this conversation is not over yet. We're going to be releasing part 2 next week, where Dorian goes more in depth about all the struggles of being an ALT and all the good and bad and ups and downs of his time in Japan. So make sure you tune in next week. In the meantime, we would really appreciate it if you could give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It would really help us out a lot. And if you like the podcast, you can join our Discord too and talk to us at any time. Peace.